Linda Akuta. Hi, everyone. I am Linda Akutagawa, and I'm the president and CEO of LEAP. I just want to say hello to our LEAP family and welcome to all of you, and thank you for joining us today. This year, our executive meeting group event. Hi, everyone. I'm Linda Akutagawa, and I'm the president and CEO of LEAP. I just want to say hello to our. Okay. I think I'm hearing double of myself. So anyways, this year, our executive meet and greet event this year is a little bit different as our theme is storytelling. And today we're going to hear the stories of longstanding leaders in the Asian and Pacific Islander community and their perspectives and experiences of Asian and Pacific Islander resilience, collaboration, and collective impact. Now let's go ahead and get started. First up is our speaker, Wenfu Wu. And Wenfu is a LEAP board member, as well as a LEAP program alumnus. He also serves as our LEAP board treasurer. Professionally, he is the managing director and head of asset allocation and portfolio construction for the TIAA General Account. And so if you're a teacher, you may be familiar with TIAA. Also at TIAA, he is the past national board chair and strategic advisor for their Asian American ERG, Engage. All right, Wenfu?
All right, thanks, Linda. Thank you. Just want to make sure you guys can hear me okay. So I'll just jump right in. So with COVID and everything, being virtual, I'm thinking the past 7 months have been an emotional roller coaster, right? Pros and cons. And I think one of the advantages of doing this event virtually, being home, is that I get to use props. And so I have a few things here that I'm going to use to kind of walk through parts of my journey, share my moments of resilience, which I think is a key theme we're trying to focus on this year. And, hopefully impart some of the lessons I've learned along the way that some of you might be able to find useful. So I have these props here, and I think hopefully it'll come together as I start talking through my story. So the Formosan black bear, for those that don't know, is unofficially the national animal of Taiwan, which is where I was born. A small town in the south called Tainan, and I have 3 older sisters. So I was the accident, which is fine. I've gotten over that, some therapy, and now I'm over that. But when I was 5 years old, my family and we immigrated to America, a small New England town in northern Connecticut called Windsor, but it wasn't my whole family. My dad was an English teacher, and he actually had one of those English night schools that I think a lot of Asian people are probably familiar with, if you're familiar with Asia. So it would have been hard for him to get a similar paying job here in America, and so he stayed back to provide financial support. So it was really my mom bringing me and my 3 sisters over to America, right? And so I have 3 kids of my own right now, an 8-year-old daughter, a 5-year-old son, and a 2-year-old son. And so I think it's one of those things you don't realize until you have kids of your own, how, the kind of sacrifices that your parents make for you, right? So for my mom to come here by herself, raise 4 kids without her husband, not really knowing a lot of English, not really knowing a lot of people, right? I mean, any single one of those things by itself would have been enough to kind of break certain people, right? But, if that's not resilience, right, I don't know what is, right? So I think as I reflect on that story, I got to imagine everyone here, right, that's listening, that's participating in this event, right? Everyone has a story like mine, right? Whether you were raised by someone other than your parents, your ancestors endured poverty, they might have endured wars, you might have lost certain people, certain loved ones, you moved to another country, you had to start from scratch, right? I think it's easy to forget how powerful those stories are, right? How inspiring they can be. And so I think for me, lesson 1 from the Formosan black bear is share your story, right? It's like learn that, find a way to share your story. Share your story with your friends, share it with your colleagues at work, share it with your boss. Right, because it brings us all to the same human level, and it puts everyone on equal footing, regardless of race, gender, your orientation, what industry, what job you have. So that's one. So growing up in New England in the 80s, I was definitely that minority. in my school, and it was hard to fit in. I remember this one time in second grade, for some reason school was being let out early, and I can't remember why, but I do remember we all needed to go up and use the one school public phone to call our parents and tell them to come pick us up, right? So phones back then looked a lot like this, rotary phones. I don't know, I'm thinking a lot of people that listen, they're participating here, that are on here, this might be the first time they've seen a phone like this. I showed it to my kids last night, and they were so confused and baffled and dumbfounded by how this thing works. It's like, you have this, you have a wire, like, what are you doing? But anyway, I remember being in line, being the next in line, kind of waiting to go up and use the phone to call my mom. And I just remember being so self-conscious about it, being so kind of just afraid of going up there, because I'd have to go up there. I'd have to talk to my mom in Taiwanese. All my friends and all the other kids in school would hear me. And I was just so self-conscious about it, right? And so I think that kind of just permeated for me through high school. I was always a bit reserved, a bit quiet, and didn't quite get out of my shell. And this lasted throughout high school, right? I went to a New England prep school where I was still, a minority, is mostly white. And it wasn't until I went to college at MIT that it kind of turned around for me. It was like a whole new world to me. Right? And I think that it was 25% of the student population was Asian. And I think the running joke was MIT stood for Made in Taiwan. And so it was only there that I really started feeling like I belonged. Right? My confidence grew. I got out of my shell. I was more outspoken. I was more outgoing. I had a lot of friends. Right? And so for me, I know what it's like to fit in. I know what it's like to fit in and how big of a difference that can make on people, right? And the resilience of having to kind of just power through those moments where you don't fit in, really kind of made me realize how big of a difference that makes, right? And so, that's why I got involved with LEAP. I serve, as Linda mentioned, I serve on LEAP's board to try to empower Asians, to get Asian representation out there, right? That is also why I got involved with my company employee resource group, to help create an inclusive culture at my company at TIAA. And so, I would say, for me, the second lesson I learned is, again, from this Rotary Phone, be the change you want to see, right? Find ways to create the culture where you think you can thrive, right? Get more involved with organizations like LEAP. Get involved with your company's employee resource group. And I think the ultimate, perhaps the most simple thing you can do, and it's very timely, is, right, go out and vote, right? Make your voice heard. The saying goes that culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? And I think every one of us has the power to create the culture, to create the environment, and create the world that we want to see. So I graduated from MIT, certified nerd, right? And I kind of propagated that even further by working as a quantitative research analyst in finance. My parents kind of ingrained in me this notion that, a bachelor's degree is not enough. You got to get more. You got to have a PhD. And I knew I didn't want to spend 8 more years in school, so I compromised and got an MBA from the University of Chicago. Graduated in 2007. And it was a great year to graduate because everyone had jobs then. Right? Everyone's getting a job. So I joined Lehman Brothers in 2007 on their sales and trading desk. This is my second prop. When you work on Wall Street, you get these HP 12C calculators, right? So you become a doctor, you get a stethoscope. You become a cop, you get a gun. But when you become a banker, on Wall Street, you get this calculator, HP 12C. And I know, especially when you put it next to the Rotary Phone, it's like, Jesus, this thing was like created back in the 80s. Well, actually it was. It was created in 1981, designed in 1981. They'd never changed it because they haven't had to. It's just one of those things that's endured through the test of time. It works, right? But yeah, I was at Lehman Brothers in 2008, 2007, and 2008, the great financial crisis came, right? The recession hit, and I was out of a job, right? And it was scary, right? And I reflect on that, and I think about, why was it so scary? Obviously it's depressing when you feel like, your identity is taken away because you rely so much on your job. But I think really it was scary because up until that point in my life, I've always had a blueprint for what to do, right? You study hard, you get into college, you recruit out of college to go to be a doctor, lawyer, banker, right? You get a job, you put your head down, work hard, get promoted, rise through the ranks, steady and true, but it's a surefire path to success, right? And, I think the challenge was that when you're out of a job in that environment that I was in, I was like, what do I do? There's no class I can take. There's no, career services center I can go to, right? And so, it was a tough time for me. The first few months of recruiting, I applied jobs online and I got some interviews and I talked to headhunters and, but I didn't get an offer, right? And so, 6 months bled into 9 months and I started getting really nervous. And I started realizing I got to take charge. I got to control this. I got to own this situation and try to guide it to where I wanted to be, right? And so that mentality, when I finally did land a job, that mentality kind of stuck with me. And so I think the way my new job was doing with investment decisions, right? Signals that say, hey, we should buy this bond, sell this bond, right? That was the job description. That was what it was laid out on a piece of paper or on the website. This is what your job is. These are your roles and responsibilities, right? And I think the way that I approached it, and perhaps I think that a lot of times our culture raises us to think about it, is that, stay inside the box, and just do a great job. Just do what you're told, right? Do it really well. Do it better, right? And do it more efficient, do it more quickly, do it more accurately, and just do a great job with it, right? But I think you kind of have to get out of that, right? So what I ended up doing, I knew I didn't want to be in a corner running models all the time, and so what I did was I took the outputs of that model and I started going around and talking to analysts that, if there's a name on there that said, hey, we should sell this bond, I'd go to talk to the research analyst that covers and talk to that person about why, what do you think about this? Where is this taking you? How would you use this information, right? And so I think that really helped, and it really allowed me to get recognized within the company. So I think, lesson 3 from this HP 12C, don't let your job define you, but let yourself define your job, right? Create your own path, right? Just because your job description says these are the things you need to do, right? Try to mold that and shape that into the job you want. Right? No one's, you shouldn't force yourself to always operate within that box. But think about what you want to do and just start doing it, right? If you feel like your job, your assignment is telling you to do certain things, well, you do that. But then think outside and think, well, what else do I want to be doing? And just start doing it naturally. People, your superiors, your company, they're going to realize, hey, he's doing a really good job with this. I should maybe switch him or her to a job more similar to what he's really good at and what he's making a difference in. So that's lesson 3, HP 12, and from my HP 12C here. So fast forward a little bit, 2012, I joined the company that I'm at right now. And it started off great. I applied all these learnings that I talked about. I created my own path, made the role bigger. I got involved with the employee resource group. I was helping create and cultivate a culture where people felt like they belonged. My boss is great. He and I really got along. And he was the chief investment officer for the portfolio, and so I was like, this is my ticket, right? Finally, things are lining up. And 2 years later, in 2014, he decides he wants to retire, right? And so, we had an interim boss at the time, and then finally, the new CIO came in. And I remember, the first day he came in, we went out to get lunch, and him and I were walking. He starts talking to me about, his vision and what he's thinking. And he's like, change, is good. It creates opportunities. So you should think about change is good. And I swear he repeated this phrase, change is good, like 5 times. And the 5th time I said, I'm thinking to myself, oh crap, this is, I'm about to get fired. He's going to lay me off, right? He has his own team he's going to bring in, so get ready for change because it's about to happen to you, right? And so, my 4th lesson, and I have a glass of water here. There's that quote from Bruce Lee, right? Become like water, my friend, right? So, I would say change is good. You do want to be adaptable, right? It gives you an opportunity to grow. And so I think every time, I remind myself, every time you feel a little uncomfortable, right, that's you growing, that's your career developing, right? So seize those opportunities to be uncomfortable and be comfortable with change. And so that's where I am right now, managing director, the head of asset allocation for TIA's $275 billion general account portfolio. It's a big job. I do enjoy what I'm doing. But I kind of just think, just to wrap it up, just this concept of resilience, right? I've dealt with it, right? I've dealt with being a minority. I think a lot of us have. I've been laid off twice, actually, which I'm, sometimes ashamed to admit. I've been laid off twice, but I think each time I was met with difficulty, right? It was always an opportunity for me to grow. Now, all these examples I've given, that I talked about, are kind of mostly situational resilience that I had to deal with, right? On my part, right? But except for one, right? And I kind of go back to the bear, right? My parents, right? They made a conscious effort to make change, to be uncomfortable, to put themselves through that resilience, so that I had an opportunity. So when I graduated high school, our school had these awards that they announced at the end of the year at graduation. One of the awards was for the top male scholar. So for some reason, they separated by male and female. So there's a top male scholar award. Who's the individual who has the best grades, right? And so my name was called for that award. And my dad told me later that when he heard my name called, he cried, right? A grown man, he actually cried. And, I think he was just so happy in that moment and so proud of me. I think, because he finally felt that the sacrifice he made was worth it, that living apart from his kids and his wife for so many years, that I had actually seized that opportunity that they're, and so yeah, I'll end it there. But this bear means a lot to me, and actually my kids gave this to me for my birthday just earlier this year. So I'm seeing that there were some questions.
Yeah, there are some questions. And thanks
Okay.
so much, Wenfu, for those stories. And I will say that Rotary Phone is like a real blast from the past. Just a quick story, and this isn't anything like what you shared, but I just remember one of the times I went to go visit one of my aunts and uncles, and they still had a rotary phone, and I'm looking at it thinking, oh no, my computer to the internet via a rotary phone. So my kids
couldn't figure out how to do it. They're like, what do you say? So it's like, how do you dial 7? They're like, well, I don't, they're like trying to turn it like a knob. They're like, they didn't heard them. You put your finger in and you go like this and it go back. They're pretty confused. It's pretty funny.
Well, that was a fun memory that came back. But one of the questions that came out from our guests is, what are some of the experiences that you mentioned during college that you finally felt that sense of belonging? What are some of those experiences that give that feeling of belonging?
Yeah. I can't describe it. It was just the feeling, right? When you see another Asian, right, that went through the same experience, that had parents that were these tiger moms that say, hey, you got to go to school, you got to study hard. They all did a violin or a piano or did an instrument. They were all told to do extracurriculars, right? They're all told you have to get 100, and they won't settle for anything less than 100 on scores. It's like, that, I don't know, you just have that commonality that like anything, you just feel like you could tell them anything, won't judge you, right? Whereas in high school and elementary school, when I told my friends, oh, yeah, I can't play today, I got to go practice my violin, they kind of look at you like, well, why don't you just practice tomorrow? Right? They didn't get it. And so, when they give you that look, and like, why don't you practice tomorrow? You have one experience that you have two experiences that you have multiple experiences like that. That's enough to just kind of make you close off, right? And when at MIT, when I said stuff like that, they're like, oh yeah, I know that it makes you feel like, wow, I can open up to these people because they can relate. They're not going to judge me anymore. They understand. And so it's just that feeling that you get, when it's like, wow, you're like, I know, I feel you,
What the first time you had that reaction, do you recall what were you confused, or did you feel like, wait a minute, I didn't have to explain further after I said something?
Yeah. I don't think I had to. I think honestly, that first week at MIT, it just clicked. Like you start talking to them, it's just, conversation was just so easy. And it was just like, it was an amazing feeling. I can't describe it. Yeah, it was pretty awesome. And I think the great thing about organizations like LEAP, right, Linda, is that we get to create that culture, right? We get to be part of the movement that's trying to create that culture for the next generation, right? For other people. And I think that's what excites me so much about being part of LEAP, being part of the board.
Thank you so much. And you know, one of the things that you said that I wrote down, and I just really feel like that I resonate with, and I hope others resonated with as well too, was the part about, you know, let yourself define your job, and you, in being able to do that, is creating a culture, like you said, where everybody can have that same feeling that you had, where you know you just belong. And I think for all of us as leaders, I think that ultimately is going to be the most important legacy that I think we can leave for not only our kids, but also for anybody who's coming into the organizations that we're in behind us, in terms of, you know, feeling like I don't have to explain myself. I don't have to, you know, say, why do I feel the way I do? We're just allowed to be who we are, and people just can accept that. So, Wenfu, I just want to say thank you so much for your stories, and I love your props. Thank you so much for sharing that. That was so awesome, and
happy to do it, Linda.
I hope that you'll be able to take part in some of the networking. I'm sure that there are probably people who have been on who are probably curious to ask you a lot more questions. And so thank you again for being a part of this session. Okay, so thank you. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to transition, and I'm going to welcome our next speaker. And she is our 2020 Margaret Ashida Leadership Award honoree, Tracey Doi. And Tracey serves as the Chief Financial Officer and Group Vice President for Toyota Motor North America. And Tracey is responsible for accounting, finance, tax, corporate strategy, and planning. And I think they're trying to get her on. Okay, so I'm going to keep going. So Tracey is she's an active board member of the National Asian American Pacific Islander Chamber of Commerce, also known as National ACE. She's also a member or active with the 2020 Women on Boards and the Japanese American National Museum. And in addition, she is also a volunteer for the Orchid Giving Circle at the Texas Women's Foundation. Yeah, so, Tracey, let's see if we can get her on.
Oh. Hey, Linda. Actually, just some small technical difficulties, but everything is okay. Get sorted out, but I'm just going to go ahead and bring in Denise. So if you don't mind just introducing Denise, and we'll move from there. Thank you.
Okay, we will do that. So one of the things that we've learned a lot this year is how to be flexible and adaptable and pivot. So, okay, so I have the pleasure of introducing then our third speaker for today, and I will say that it's one of my great pleasures. So Dr. Denise Lopez is now going to be next up. She's also a LEAP board member. She's one of our newest ones, and so I'm super excited that we were able to engage her for today's session. Denise is a professor of organizational psychology at Alliant University, and she's also a professional certified coach. She teaches in their MBA and doctoral programs on a variety of topics, and her specific areas of interest actually are, or research interests are, employee engagement, leadership, as well as diversity and inclusion. Denise, it's so nice to see you. Thanks for joining us. And I'm going to just sign off, turn off my video here, and I'm going to have you take it away.
Okay. Hi, Linda. Let me know. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you for that introduction. It's really a pleasure to be here and share my story with you today. As Linda mentioned, I'm a professor in organizational psychology at Alliant International University. I've been teaching in the United States for over 20 years. I taught for a while in the Philippines, which is my native country, and then in the United States, where I received my doctorate in the late 1990s. So first of all, I'd like to mention that as a professor, speaker, and consultant, I frequently get invitations to speak and give talks, but most of the talks are about my areas of expertise, such as how do you engage people, how do you motivate them, how can you become a better leader, and so forth. But interestingly, Leap has been the first to invite me to talk about my own story, and I'm very appreciative of that opportunity. Reflecting on my life got me thinking about the themes of resilience and collaboration and impact and legacy. It's been an interesting journey just to reflect on them. So where to begin? I'd like to say my story is kind of a rags to riches story, or one where somebody rises to the top of their profession and received a lot of accolades. It's not necessarily that for me. I was born in the Philippines a few decades ago, and actually to a life of privilege. My father's family managed sugar plantations in one of the more affluent provinces in the Philippines. And I grew up in a rural area, kind of sheltered from society. And I spent my time playing with farm workers and riding horses and carabaos and swimming in the river and climbing trees like a tomboy. But I realized early on that I was a very lucky girl to live in a comfortable home and have lots of toys to play with. But I knew my friends did not have as much. And I made it a point always to include them, to share my treats, my toys, and invite them always to play with me and stay over. And I started to ask, even at an early age, like, are we taking care of our workers? Are we paying them enough? Do they have enough to eat? How do they have access to healthcare and so forth? Often I was not successful as a little girl, but I think this is where I started to develop an interest in human rights and equality. So though I lived a privileged life and I did very well in school, a curious experience in my teens alerted me to racial differences. And my interest in racial differences started very young. One summer when I was 13, my family took a trip to the United States. We visited San Francisco, Hawaii, Los Angeles, and we did the usual touristy stuff. But we were hanging out in Market Street in downtown San Francisco, and this, white male, rather slovenly person approached us and stood right in front of me and screwed up his face and said, "Yuck," right in front of me. And he went away muttering, "Oh, these people are invading our space." That experience, I was so incensed, thinking, who is this person to say this to me? And that, we may be foreigners, but we were well dressed, we were well behaved, we were minding our own business, and he was not. And this experience made me think a lot about colonial mentality and the subconscious programming that people in the Philippines and other countries in the third world who have been colonized. These are, things we grow up with. And we realize that even though we are educated, privileged, wealthy, there is this sense that, people who are white from a certain race are more privileged. And so, it really resonated with me and got me thinking about issues of equality, as I said, fairness, access to opportunities, and so forth. And I think this is what shaped me to go into psychology and education as a career. I was very interested, and I continued to work on research and consulting and coaching work that focuses on men and women from minority groups and really helping them to maximize their careers and maximize their education. I'm really interested in topics such as microaggression and social injustices. Of course, when I reflect on that experience with that white man many decades later, I realized that if I try to look at it from his perspective, maybe he was homeless, maybe he was mentally ill, maybe it was just really a bad day for him and I was judging him too harsh. And maybe seeing prosperous Asians might have been the last straw for him. And also perhaps he learned about racism from other people like his parents and friends. But I also realized that myself, we do have other biases ourselves. Regardless of where we are, we have biases, whether it be about race or gender or LGBTQ groups and so forth. We all have these biases, and they affect the way we interact with each other. So I told myself there has to be a bigger picture to this, which is why I continue to study and teach about topics related to social and organizational psychology, intergroup behavior, and cross-cultural relations. Okay, let me finish what I'm saying. I see a question here. What advice do you have for someone who is still finding their authentic self in the workplace? This is a really good question because, the next story I was going to share was, the fact that when I went to the United States.
Now let's see if I can get this to change. No, it's still.
Hello? Can you guys still hear me, or should I be stopping?
Going.
All right. So going back to how do you find your authentic self in the workplace? I think it starts with accepting who you are. For the longest time when I was in the United States and I was in school and I was studying, I realized, I'm doing very well academically and technically. But I found that there were people who the louder people, the more aggressive people tended to be heard. And it was really a process for me to figure out, I don't want to be too aggressive because I am not that kind of person. But there are ways in which you can express your authentic self by being passionate, by raising your voice, by speaking out, and by showing your expertise. And you can still be as female as you can, and as graceful, if so to speak, as you can, as long as you stand your ground. So I think that the key here is knowing who you are and knowing that you have something to offer, whether it's your unique experience, your expertise, your competence, and that people need to listen to you. I think it's when we, underestimate ourselves and our capabilities that we kind of, put ourselves down, and therefore we're not even able to show up authentically and competently in the workplace. So, in reflecting over some of the things that I've learned over the years and my own story, I've realized that, especially during this time when it's such a difficult time for us to be living in, one of the things that can make us resilient is thinking about what is your purpose in life, right? What are you in the world that here for? And in my case, it was really, my unique talent is teaching, educating, mentoring other people. And so long as I'm doing a good job about that, I know I'm making an impact on somebody. It could be just one person. And that's enough for today. Right. So resilience is about living day to day, being hopeful, and celebrating whatever accomplishment you've had, whether big or small, that was meaningful for that day. And also, I think the second thing is reaching out to others and finding people who are similar to you, who share the same passions. And this is actually why I'm so fortunate to have found LEAP and to be serving on LEAP, because it fully complements, and I feel it's a good match of what I'm passionate about and what the organization is all about. And finding people like who are like you, finding your tribe is so important, especially if you are going to continue doing good work in a very challenging place such as where we are today. All right. So that's all I had. Let me end with this one thought. I think the one thought I've realized, which I wish to share with everyone, especially our LEAP friends, is that we don't have to be like other people to be great leaders, right? We just have to find our unique voices and be ourselves and embrace ourselves for who we are. And when we show up as our true selves authentically, we have a lot of power, and we can actually be viewed as credible and competent in the workplace. So thank you. And let me end there. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you so much, Denise, for sharing your story. I really liked what you just said at the very end about finding our unique voice, our unique style. I know that I had a conversation actually recently, and someone said, it seems hard to try to be your most authentic self when the environment that you're in, the organization that you're in, is not always conducive to it. But I think what I'm hearing from what you're saying is that there is a place for that even in organizations. And it reminds me of what Wen Fu also just said about let yourself define your role. And it sounds like what you're also saying is that letting our unique selves come out will also help to create the kind of environments that we can best thrive into. So.
Absolutely. I think the tendency is, and I always tell this to people, the tendency is we might have to always change ourselves to try and fit in. But the truth of the matter is, why not find some? There are two solutions. One is find the place that best fits you, because that might be the wrong place that you're trying to fit in. And no matter how you try, you'll never fit in. And the second is obviously, think about what matters to you. You can make some adjustments, and you can speak to people to support you and to understand you better so that they can be your advocates at work.
Well, thank you very much. I so appreciate hearing that, and I'm sure there's a lot of others that do too. I hope that what you can do is you could join us in the networking session, and I'm sure that there's others again who have been on this executive meet and greet who would love to be able to have a chance to talk with you one-on-one as well too. So thank you so much for being here with us, and I loved hearing your stories, and I know that now I have more to ask you too later on.
Thank you, Linda.
Right. Thank you so much. Good to see you. All right. Okay, everyone. I'm going to try this again. And I am so very pleased to introduce now who will be our last speaker, our 2020 Margaret Ashida Leadership Award honoree, Tracey Doi. Tracey serves as the Chief Financial Officer and Group Vice President for Toyota Motor North America. She is responsible for accounting, finance, tax, corporate strategy, and planning. Tracey, you are very, very busy. Tracey is an active board member of the National Asian American Pacific Islander Chamber of Commerce. She's also a member of the board of the 2020 Women on Boards, focused on getting more women on corporate boards, and the Japanese American National Museum. And in addition, she is also a volunteer for the Orchid Giving Circle through the Texas Women's Foundation. Tracey, welcome, and it's so nice to see you. I'm glad that we were able to resolve the technical issues.
Wonderful to be with you, Linda, and the LEAP family. Apologize for the technical difficulties, but that is our new world, right? And we are resilient. So I thought I'd share a little bit about my family background and how that might tie into the conversation that we're having today related to resiliency, collaboration, impact, and legacy. So I was really fortunate to grow up in a close-knit family. My grandparents, aunts and uncles, cousins were all down the street from each other, and we went to the same elementary school and high school, and I went to UCLA with one of my cousins. I was especially close to my grandfather, who demonstrated resiliency to me. Prior to World War II, my grandfather and his father had a very successful distribution business, first established in Hawaii, and then transferred the business to LA on First Street in Little Tokyo. But after Pearl Harbor, my great-grandparents, grandparents, my own parents, aunts, and uncles were among the 120,000 Japanese Americans that were incarcerated behind barbed wire by the U.S. government for the duration of the war. Grandpa lost his business, his home, and his freedom, but he persevered. And he came out of camp 4 years later with $25 in his pocket. And at age 54, had to restart his life with the responsibility of his parents, 4 children, and his cousin's family of 9. Initially, they all worked on a relative's farm in Ridley, California, picking peaches in the hot sun until Grandpa saved up enough to open his own egg farm in Gardena, California on Rosecrans Boulevard. He managed to send all 4 children, including my mother, to UCLA. And he never complained. I mean, growing up, he was always really upbeat and full of energy and encouragement to all 14 grandchildren, and really focused on ensuring that we understood that it was important to work hard and do our best. And I call that resiliency. My dad also emphasized that same work ethic ever since my sister and I were little. We used to laugh. He would flick on the lights, even on a Saturday morning early, yell, "Rise and shine." And while you're sleeping, remember, someone else is working. At work, I'm proud that Toyota has demonstrated resiliency. In mid-March, to protect the health and safety of our team members, we shut down all 14 of our plants in North America for 7 weeks. Our manufacturing team studied in depth how to adopt to the new safety protocols to ensure our team members are safe. Now I'm pleased to say that all 14 plants are up and running. They're at full capacity to best support the needs of our customers. But I really love the ingenuity and the heart of our team. On their own, our R&D and manufacturing team came up with the idea of designing and producing 500,000 face shields to support our community frontline heroes. So it's really about make the best of a very difficult situation, leverage our talents, and help our communities. And I call that resilience. I just celebrated 20 years at Toyota. I have to tell you, it's gone by very fast. And I'm proud to be with a company that embraces the values of respect for people and continuous improvement. It really helps when you find that alignment between your own personal values and your company and your team. So I'm very blessed. I enjoy the technical challenge of my role in finance and corporate strategy, but I'm also allowed the opportunity to devote time to support our community. It's a really collaborative environment, and Toyota encourages our team members to get involved. And it's much more than writing a check. We all want to make an impact. So an example that's near and dear to my heart is that we have an incredible Asian employee resource group called Tasia, and they have 3 areas of focus. One is the development of our team members, and this is where the partnership with LEAP has been so valuable. We really appreciate their efforts to work with us to help lift the next generation of our leaders. We've also recently implemented a new mentoring program. Tasia also focuses on our business strategy, recognizing the significant impact that Asian Americans have on our economy. And third is community. Tasia volunteers in a lot of different ways, but the signature program that we are all most proud of is our tie-in with APIA Scholars. And we've been able to give scholarships of over 700,000 to 130 plus students that are focused on STEM. I always encourage team members to volunteer. It's a great way to grow skills, develop leadership, and it's such a fun thing to do with friends and family to support a worthy cause. Maybe you're not sure how to get started, but I would just say volunteer for a committee with a nonprofit that you care about. For me, that was JANM, the Japanese American National Museum, really focused on the preservation of the legacy of Japanese Americans. I first served on the gala committee, helping to raise funds. I assure you, everyone wants your help, your talents. That could be in social media, it could be project management skills, sponsorship development. I think there's a fallacy that philanthropy is only for the wealthy, but everyone can give back. All of you have talents. My mom set a great example. She's a crafter, and she has always donated her special gifts to church fundraisers. My husband, Mark, is an avid supporter of giving circles, small groups of friends and family that come together for a common cause. And he likes to say, big things start small. It's how you leverage your talents. For him, it's pulling together silent auctions and raffles. When I talk about giving circles, it's something that we have really embraced as a family. Mark's part of the founding group, Sansei Legacy, that give back to the Japanese American community. With our children, they have had through high school 2 giving circles called Changing the Community, fundraising, volunteering time, and